Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've asked you to submit to us questions about what you are going through with the coronavirus quarantine and shelter in place situation that is affecting all of our education foundations and our school systems. So over the past few weeks, we've been collecting your questions so that we could today sit down with a panel of experts and answer your questions. My name is Laurie Cromwell, and I'm president of Foundation Innovation, and we have an awesome team here at Foundation Innovation, including Sean Calloway, Erica Equerzel, Susie Pagel, Maya Bethany, and Don Parnell, and Chris Airy. So we are going today to be giving you advice from all of our different perspectives. We each have a little bit of a different take on things, but collectively, I think you'll be able to take away some really good information about how we can all work together to handle the crisis that we are in and the uncertainty that continues to take place. So I am going to group these. As you would imagine, there are a lot of questions that are similar, maybe a little bit different perspective, but have to do with some of the same similarities. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about corporate documentation. We're getting quite a few questions. I'm going to read a couple of them to you. From Kim, in a crisis as this one, exactly what can we do to help? We are to adhere to our designation, bylaws, and funding priorities, but it does not include things like grab-and-go meals for breakfast and lunch, technology needs that they may have, busy bags for free and reduced lunch kits, or even gift cards for emergency needs. Is there a special consideration or verbiage we need to use in order to put this in place? Kristen says, hi all, can you advise us on amending nonprofit bylaws so that we can still conduct business via phone and video calls for social distancing, yet still be in compliance? Currently, our bylaws do not allow us to vote virtually. Any suggested verbiage guidance would be appreciated. So that's a really good question. Many times we have our bylaws that nobody has looked at in a very long time. It is that now is the time to take your bylaws out and read them. If you are not allowed per those operating bylaws to vote electronically or to have video conferences like this to take action, you want to amend your bylaws. Now, how do you do that when you can't get together for a meeting? Most states have what they call a meeting in lieu of a meeting. And all that means is that you can have a video conference just like this. You can take action. Now, that action would depend on what the amendment section of your bylaws state, so you're going to need to comply with that. And then any amendments that you're trying to make would be voted on. And then when the minutes are produced and when we can actually all get together again, or you can do it via email, it must be signed by all of the directors. That's typically the case in most states, showing that you have agreed to do a meeting in lieu of a meeting. So once that amendment has been approved, you should be able to handle video conferencing and taking action through emails and video conferencing. The other question comes about with the whole structure of our funding priorities and if they're changing, which many of us are changing the way that we are funding because we are not funding perhaps innovative classroom grants. And we're taking that money and putting it towards other efforts that are immediate needs of the district. That is totally fine. Most education foundations that support public school systems have one thing in mind, one common mission, and that is to support the school system. So whatever that means, maybe it means access to technology, to the internet. Maybe that means additional hardware, Chromebooks. Maybe that means food bags. Whatever that might mean as a priority for your district, you should be able to comply and change as a board where those priorities would lie with you as an education foundation. Any other thoughts, panel, on corporate documents or bylaws or any of the changes in funding priorities?
I will make a mention of the foundation's mission statement. You can do a whole lot through your mission statement. If you are having trouble with that right now, if your mission statement is so limited, you may want to consider revising that and open it up so that there are multiple options, especially when situations like this arise.
That's exactly right. You do want to be compliant, but you have the opportunity to make sure that your actions fall within your corporate documents. Changing your corporate documents is something that you can do as a local board. You don't need to submit bylaws to anybody. It's just a document that you have there that's critically important to the structure and the governance of the Education Foundation. So we're going to talk a little bit about fundraising. There were quite a few. In fact, most of the questions that we received revolved around some form of fundraising. How do we continue to fundraise? Where are we going to be able to fundraise? What are some of those ideas of fundraising, since we have different opportunities that are happening? And the first one that I'm going to read is from Kristen, and she brings up a really good point that I think is extremely important for us to emphasize and to actually talk about as a board. She says, good morning, just wanted to put a tip out there. Please have open conversations with your district about what you'd like to provide and what they support and truly need before running with a program plan. Sometimes community ideas are wonderful, but they don't align with the district needs. Being on the district side, I just encourage everyone to plan alongside their district before starting new initiatives. When there's a breakdown in communication, it can crack the relationship between the Education Foundation and the school system. So if the schools need certain things, and sometimes it doesn't align perhaps with the mission of the foundation or funding priorities, then there needs to be a conversation to make sure everybody is on the same page. I think this is a critically important aspect of who we are as education foundations. We are here to support the public school system, but they know better than us. They know better than anybody how to run the district and some of the deficiencies that they're facing right now. And it's our job as education foundations to help that conversation take place. And it may not be an easy conversation. Many times we're hearing from people saying, we're trying to ask the district what they want, and they are in such a reactive mode, we're not getting a good response. So I would say that it's important for us to make sure that conversation takes place, even right now, when our administrators and our superintendents are super busy and very much trying to adhere to the compliance of making sure that we're educating kids and getting the tools that we need. Because the Education Foundation, as you know, we're nimble enough that we can go out there into the community, not physically, but we can reach out to our donors, we can generate funds, we can corral the support to be able to help those funding priorities that the district has identified. And it should not be something that we decide as an education foundation, like Krista mentions, because it can really create some problems with that relationship. If the district does not have a clear, concise understanding, I know of a couple of districts that have made suggestions of things that they know that their donors might be interested in supporting financially, such as hotspots or Chromebooks. And so if that is taking place, maybe just the idea setting, but I know they're super busy, but it is a really important conversation and is a benefit to the district and the whole school system. Any other thoughts?
Chime in and
Sorry, one thing we might add on that is that it is a fluid situation. I think it's important for us to remember that whereas a district might have a need at the beginning of this, it could change. And so I think just reminding foundations that, you know, to be flexible during this time and know that the needs might change as we go through the scenario.
That's a great point, Dawn. And the other thing I'd say is when you're looking at your bylaws pertaining to the first two questions too, make sure that you have the superintendent and your board of trustees representatives on your Education Foundation board. I just think having that liaison back and forth, and there's several times when I know the superintendent's so busy, but it's easy for us to reach out to that board of trustee and have them visit with us about things that are going on and understand better what the school district is thinking and how the Education Foundation can assist in making that happen.
Good point. The other thing I would add to that is to keep in mind your strengths and abilities as an education foundation. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and there are going to be a lot of needs that come up. Many of them are going to be very appropriate for the Education Foundation to help fill. Technology needs, school bags, you know, supplies, that sort of thing. But be very mindful of your group's abilities to react to aspects of this situation. You may not be the best organization to take care of housing needs, for example. It might be tempting to consider doing something like that because that's where a donor's heart might be right now. But have very careful deliberate conversations about whether or not you are the right group to fulfill each need that comes up.
That's exactly right. And, you know, we're seeing price tags vary on how to deal with the instruction side of a school system and how they are equipped virtually. Some were prepared 100%. Some were not even prepared 1%. So like Susie said, it's going to be a really customized conversation based on what is happening with the school system and letting us be part of the solution, because we have the time and the credibility and the interest from our community members, especially those that have been donating to the foundation. So engaging them in what we're doing and making sure that we are actually part of the solution is our whole ultimate goal. Okay, let's get into some real fundraising questions, because I know that's really heavy on everybody's mind. Teresa says that she's concerned about how this will affect fundraising for them next school year. With small businesses struggling and many affected by the stock market, how do we even begin to make a case for support when there most likely will be a ton of basic need and more important causes than ours? How do we broach the subject with our donors? Becky says, our foundation has purchased learning tools for classrooms in our school for 10 years. Because of the urgent need and immediate need, our students need access to interactive learning and distance learning. Most of those mean iPads, notebooks, and chargers were distributed to 20% of our student population in the need of technology at home. We want to refurbish our interactive learning materials and build up larger IT supplies. Do you think that that would be a need that is appealing to donors, or is it not an urgent enough need compared to shelter and food? Brian says, thank you for hosting. Are there any industries right now that are capable of donating to nonprofits? Norma says, how do we continue to fundraise without appearing to be insensitive or opportunistic? Colleen says, is this an appropriate time to reach out to donors? Our families are under so much stress. No school for many, no work. Those that have money donate to supporting more immediate needs, the homeless, the jobless. Is this appropriate time to reach out for asking for support for grants? Joan says, we raised a huge amount of money with people eager to help. Great, right? My question is, what should we do to retain them as donors to our overall mission? Most of these donations were from entirely new people. I want to introduce them to us, but not give the impression that I'm exploiting the situation. And lastly, from Maisel, I know everyone is asking the same question. When is it appropriate to fundraise amidst this crisis? What is appropriate fundraising messaging? Lots of good questions.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and just kind of kick us off on that. I believe that the time has never been more critical for education foundations to step up. Our whole role in the community is to help connect resources to needs, and our districts need us. Again, as many of my colleagues have emphasized, the case for support should definitely underscore the true needs of the district, and we decide where we can then align with the resources that we have, the mission focus that we carry, and follow through with that. I think too that as education foundations, big, small, new, established, we are all much more nimble than our districts and able to kind of get ahead of the curve in regard to communicate the needs, the opportunities, help rally people by giving them information that is accurate and real time, hence the relationship building, not only with the school district and the trustees to understand the true needs, but also with our community of donors and prospective donors who do want to help in some way. They just need the opportunity kind of opened up to them.
I agree with Erica. If your donors loved your organization a month ago, that has not changed. They still care for your nonprofit and they still want to see you succeed. And I would also encourage you to keep in mind that it's not our job to decide who has the ability to give and who we shouldn't be talking to. Everyone has the right to have access to our success. And they'll have to decide for themselves how much is appropriate, when it's appropriate. But I would hate to see us exclude anybody because we decide on their behalf that it's not the right time.
I actually have a good story related to that, Susie, because I had a donor one time who had invested and sponsored several events for us. And so when the next event came around, I decided that I would lay low and not ask them and go ask someone else. And he came back to me and he said, "Why did you not ask me to sponsor this event?" And I said, "Well, I didn't want to wear you out and burden you too much." And he said, "You took that opportunity away from me."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important for us to realize that it's not your money, it's their money, and they want to give, they have a need to give, and let them make that choice. But as you mentioned, Susie, it's just important that you give them the opportunity to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And with the CARES Act that just passed, I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but they've upped the limits that corporations and individuals can give. So there may be some tax incentives for them to give. They've upped corporations from 10 to 25% and have changed or allowed individuals the limit to exceed from 60% up to 100% of their adjusted gross income this year. So you might have some donors that are willing to step up big and take advantage of that.
One thing to keep in mind as well is your communication with your donor base. People are worried right now that they might appear insensitive if they reach out and ask for money. But Susie and Sean both touched on great points. That's not our place to decide. If people want to help and have the capacity to help, they're still going to do so. So if you're going to communicate with your donors, I think there's a little bit of a habit with education foundations to not want to put out the needs, to not discuss the problems. We want everyone to always think everything's going well and going great with our district. This is not the time to sugarcoat everything that's happening. If you have needs in the district, this is the time to put that information out there. So move away from the mindset that we're not going to share a list of what we need to function. No, this is absolutely the time to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that right off the bat, then you can make a strategic effort. You can do campaigns that either have an appeal, a direct appeal, or those that don't. Maybe you list something in a non-appeal that's just your services, what it is that you're doing, what you're maintaining as an education foundation. Maybe it's just that you're just getting together and having meetings to talk with the district about how you can help. That's fine. Share that in an email. Share that you're still under operations. This is not a time to close your doors, as Lori has said. And then also, maybe after you do that, if you don't feel comfortable making that direct appeal, then maybe put together the list of things. This is what the district needs to educate our kids right now. And then give your donors that option. But I would highly think about maybe doing something strategic with starting with the non-appeal and then moving into an appeal. And it can be as simple as, and Susie can speak more to this, maybe even just including the donate button in your correspondence without drawing massive attention to it. But as she said, if people loved your organization a month ago and wanted to help, they'll still want to. It might just be at a different level.
I would add a word of encouragement if you've thought, I better leave my donors alone right now. I have never had more success in getting donors to talk to me. It's amazing when I call them and tell them I just wanted to check on them and see how they were doing. The first thing they want to know is what's going on with the school. How are you handling it? And I had an attorney that talked to me so long yesterday that I thought he was going to send me a bill. I was grateful he did not. He's never talked to me that long before, but he wanted to know all about it. And I think that a lot of my donors that I've talked to have a newfound respect for teachers after trying to teach in their own home for several weeks now. I think that more than ever, they realize the value of our teachers and our educational system. But don't ignore the issue either. It might be tempting to just jump into a phone call and disregard the whole COVID thing as if they would forget about it. That's not practical. You have to acknowledge the big issue when you call. And as I said, it's been a springboard for me to talk about the things that the Education Foundation is not only equipped to do, but grants that we already put into place, like the Little Free Library or the Wi-Fi buses that are actually already helping, that were awarded a long time ago.
Yeah, I love the message that we are open for business. We really are open for business more so than ever. When this first started becoming a pandemic, we were getting phone calls that we were just, as a foundation, going to lay low and shut the doors. And my response is that is absolutely not what we need to be doing, because we are in the perfect position to be that bridge between the community and the school district. They do not know how to go out and ask the community perhaps for the funding needs. Like Susie said, stewarding your donors right now, there is not a better time to reassure your donors that you are open for business and you are ready to help the district and the community. In most communities, the school system is one of the most robust businesses in that community. So your district really is counting on your education foundation to be there and to bring your grassroots resources and understanding and engagement of the problems that they're going through, because every day, like Dawn said, is different. We don't really know. They're changing state by state. They're changing federally. So we have to make sure that we know, and our educators and students in our community know, we as education foundations are open for business.
And you know, Lori, to add to that, now is the time to introduce ourselves to new donors as well. I know districts are receiving, as you mentioned, many calls from people wanting to help, companies, businesses wanting to help. So being that bridge and reaching out to the district to ask the district, is there anyone I can, reach out to on your behalf and call back? And so there's an opportunity to make relationships there as well.
And one of the questions revolved around, I've got all these new donors that are trying to help during this crisis. I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of their generosity. When you're looking at the mission of the foundation, you don't have to go back to the way things were after this crisis is over. Maybe you've developed a new way of funding priorities that align with the district. Maybe there's another way that you can engage the community. What you're doing in your work is collective as an education foundation. So you don't have to segment yourself to say, well, we used to do teacher grants or grants in the classroom or to a department, and now we're doing this technology piece, and we're someday going to go back to the other. They're both equally important. Who knows what's going to happen down the road? And as long as we are responsive and we can work with the district, that's our goal. So I would say, to those of you that are concerned about your new donors coming on, this is not a one-time opportunity. If you do what Susie's talking about and steward them, make them feel appreciated, listen to them, help them to love your mission, they will stay with you, not just in crisis, but they will stay with you for all of the funding needs of the school system.
One of the other things I'd like to mention is the opportunity to send a mass email out to your prospect and donor database. I did that earlier this week. My first thought was, okay, what do I have to report? I really don't have hard facts. I can't speak for my district, but I can speak for what our foundation does and what we have the capability to do. For example, we have an academic recognition banquet hosted for our seniors on May 14th. I don't know if we're going to get to have that or not, but what I do know is that if we don't have it on May the 14th, our organization is flexible enough and we are open for business, and we can host that event in June or in July. And I know a lot of our senior parents are starting to worry about that, so I just outlined that possibility in the newsletter and talked about a few other things that have been going on in the district and what the Education Foundation has been to provide to support them. And as Maya mentioned, I just left the subtle donate button that I have at the end of all of my newsletters. I didn't draw attention to it. But I left it there. The fundraiser in me just had to leave it there. And I got 3 donations overnight. And we're not in a fundraising campaign right now. We do our annual campaign in the fall. So for me to get that kind of support was very encouraging.
And Lori, just to on the questions list, I know someone had inquired as well about other industries that are supporting nonprofits, education foundations right now. And this is probably something that Erica can speak to, but there are private foundations right now that recognize the situation and are wanting to provide operational support as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Maya. Yes, I think during this time, specifically, this is going to encourage education foundations to think more about diversifying their how they generate funds. And so here we've discussed our current individual donors, future and prospect individual donors, corporations who also are finding ways and new ways to connect with nonprofits. And to what Maya was sharing was there are private foundations, many of us education foundations, who have applied for philanthropic grants that we're starting to see an uptick, particularly in them stepping up to fund both programmatic and operational costs, because that is necessary, in addition to carving out funds that is specific to COVID needs. So this yet again gives another opportunity to connect, share what is going on in your community, in your district, and hopefully drive funds that help support those needs.
One of the questions revolved around refurbishing some hardware or other IT information, and that I think lends itself back to the example that we talked about aligning with the district. So I would suggest that you, as a foundation, if you have identified something that you think might be helpful to the district, that you make sure that there's conversation, that there's understanding of the outcomes, that the logistics that go along with it are really clear for both groups. So that's going to be really important. So I would recommend not just going off and trying to figure out how to refurbish something unless that's something the district really could benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
So if those of you that are changing your ways of fundraising or changing what you're funding, you're not alone. Of all the nonprofits in the United States, 74% have already indicated that they're changing the way that they either fund things or the way that they're fundraising. So this is not new to you. We don't want anybody to feel like that they're an island. Part of the reason that we wanted to have this panel discussion is so that everybody understands that we do have resources with each other. We have network opportunities to make sure that we can ask questions, we can talk to other people. So some of you that have called are anxious, some are panic-stricken, some are absolutely joyful because it's brought about so many amazing opportunities. So wherever you are in that scale, I want you to remember that you're not alone, that there are a lot of people that love the work that you do and support what you do.
Lori, that's a great point. And I'd probably just really encourage everyone to, these are new times and we assume everything will go back to normal, but it may not. And there's an opportunity for us right now to try new opportunities, to try new fundraising tactics, to see what works and what doesn't work, and really step out of your box. And that may be something that works so well during this time that you can carry it over in the future and continue to use it. So again, right now you kind of have a free pass and you can try a whole bunch of different things and see what happens. I think Lori may be frozen there for a minute. I'm not sure exactly what's happened to her. So
should we move on? I've got the list of questions here for number 3 in front of me if you want me to go ahead and read those off.
That'd be great, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
The third group of questions revolves around events, which I'm sure many of you have some upcoming events. Spring seems to be the event season for many foundations. So we have a few questions here. One from Shirley. She's like, our big fundraiser for the year is scheduled for April 17th. Clearly we have to cancel or postpone. What do you think we should do? If we cancel, how do we make up the lost revenue during the next few months? Michael, he had asked, I think the main issue we'll be addressing at this time, how to pivot quickly to address things like loss of revenue through canceled events and sponsorships. We had another question from Anita. I would love to see the kinds of things other education foundations are doing to support their districts. We've coordinated community volunteers for food distribution, brought and distributed emergency supplies, and are coordinating teachers to deliver meals to families who can't get to school. These are immediate needs and have been taken care of. What are long-term needs that we could expect? And then I'm interested to hear about your recommendations and thoughts. We're facing the strong possibility of not having our annual fundraiser. And of course, our investments are taking a hit as well. So I'm wondering how to balance the effects on budget with the potential need for our districts as they go to the distance learning. That is from Alice. We have a question from Amy. in the midst of their spring campaign that had to be canceled. Similar points brought up by her, Wendy as well. They've had to cancel 4 fundraising events that were scheduled in March and April. So we'll definitely talk about that. And then the last one is from Martha. Their gala is in October. So she's wondering about reaching out to potential donors now, or should they hold off on making those contacts to the potential sponsors?
Chris, I'd love to jump and start this one because
Sure.
I actually have a gala planned for April the 18th. So I am in the midst of that as well. We were able to postpone ours and move it to September, but I know that is causing a lot of concern for a lot of people. And talking about canceling it causes a lot of heartache because there are opportunities that you worry about. You know, you don't want to upset your sponsors, you don't want to upset your donors, and you obviously want to have a great event as well. As Erica mentioned, the first thing I would say is make sure that you've diversified what you're doing. You know, fundraising probably needs to encompass not more than 33% of your fundraising opportunities. I'd say, you know, an annual campaign or personal ask of every person be another 33%, and then the private foundations and the philanthropic grants would probably be another 33%. But with that, if you do have to cancel, I would definitely recommend that you make contact, or even postpone, that you make contact with those sponsors, keep them in the loop of what's going on, ask them if they're willing to move with you in your event to whenever time frame that is, and if they want a refund. If you need to cancel, you can ask them if they would consider donating that money as an investment into your foundation, or if you have a need to cancel it, you know, maybe they want to just get their money back. And if you do, I would definitely encourage you to refund their money as quickly as you possibly could to make sure that those donor relations stay tip top and in the best shape that they can be in, so that there's no issue about that as well.
Yeah, we've been involved with a couple foundations who have had to cancel their events, and rather than cancel them per se, they moved them to a virtual format, which seemed to work out pretty well for them from the feedback that we've gotten. They've moved all their live and silent auctions to a mobile platform for mobile bidding. They've definitely put the just fund a need straight donation request on there as well. And from, like I said, the feedback that we've gotten from those couple foundations here in the Midwest is they still had excellent results from that, and obviously some reduction in their overall expenses as well.
So there's a group called the Washington Performing Arts, and if you are having a lot of heartburn about your gala and being canceled, which is a huge concern right now of canceling events, but if that applies to you, they created a virtual gala. Their gala had about 600 people on an annual basis. In 3 days, they converted it over to a virtual platform, and I found their webinar online, and it is about 2 hours, so I skimmed through it, but it did have some good ideas about how do you actually implement a virtual gala. They ended up raising, it's my understanding, about the same amount of money. Only about 16% asked for a refund, and they reduced their expenses by 65%. So yeah, you may not have the interaction to socialize, but one thing that I think we can take away just canceling events and the heartache that it is creating for us financially is that higher education and their basic principles of fundraising are revolving around relationship building. So getting people involved in your foundation's mission. What are we trying to solve? Why do we exist? Instead of coming to a big party. So I will tell you, whether you're doing a gala, a golf tournament, a cow patty toss, whatever your event is that is being canceled, you can recover from it financially. And it may even force us as foundations to have those conversations about what does a true annual campaign look like? What is it when we talk to people about giving? Because I will guarantee you, and I'm pretty much one of them, I don't go to events for fundraisers. I give money to the cause and I build a relationship with that organization. That is what is going to sustain you financially. So if you're relying heavily on events, I think it'd be a really good time to start to diversify that thinking. Even if you keep the events, you don't have to get rid of them. I think, though, that the relationship that you have with donors and the opportunity that you have right now to learn how to do that, if you're not already doing it, is going to really help you with the return on that investment. You're not going to spend near the time, and you'll receive more money by that relationship building piece.
Yeah, a couple other
Lori,
themes that were in the questions were, obviously, if we're having to postpone or cancel our event, what do we do in the near term as far as those funds? And I know we mentioned it earlier, but the CARES Act that did pass, 501c3s are applicable to apply for assistance through that, whether it's through the I think it's called the EDIL, the Economic Disaster Loan, and also for the payroll protection plan or paycheck protection plan, something like that. Those have worked out that they are forgivable loans. And I think, Sean, you were saying that you walked through the process to apply for one of those.
I did on Monday. I applied for the EIDL emergency disaster loan, payroll protection. That is a loan that they will look at your operating expenses, and if it's used for payroll, they'll actually grant you the money for 2.5 months of your operating expenses. And they actually ask you in the form, what were your operating expenses for the last calendar year? They're going to want to know your overall gross revenue. And they also want, here's a little hint. Once you start the application, you can't save it. So you got to get it all at once and get it done. It actually took me about 20 minutes to do total. But they do want to know your routing number and your account number, because once they verify that you're a legit organization, you filed your 990s, everything's good to go, they'll just deposit that directly into your account for your education foundation. I would really encourage you to make sure that that you go through with that. If it's used for operating expenses, payroll, rent, lease, mortgage, those kind of things, then it is forgivable. So you don't have to repay that loan. Great opportunity. And they say that they'll give you a portion of it up to $10,000 within 2 to 3 days.
And also one note too about that for people that are looking for information on the CARES Act. We did share, Foundation Innovation did share some information on our Twitter page, our Twitter account, and also our Facebook page if you'd like to go there and learn more. It's a great article from Forbes encouraging nonprofits to look into support for that. So that's available on the Foundation Innovation Facebook and Twitter pages.
One other thing that you as education foundations might want to be aware of is that donations that are given in 2020, Chris mentioned that if you itemize your taxes, they actually, which is about 8% of us, they actually have increased the amount that they will allow based on your adjusted gross income. But even better news is that on the regular application, not the itemized Schedule A, but just the regular 1040 and 1040 A and all of the ones that you would be able to file will have one line in there to allow you up to $300, 100% deduction for a charitable contribution. So if you're giving to your foundation, at least $300 is deductible on your taxes for any individual or couple. So I think that's really good news that that we're seeing that the responsiveness by our federal government, that our work, that charitable work is important, and it's solving some social needs that are extremely important to all of us. So that's another great opportunity for us to be able to tell donors about their donation. So let's get into some of this more specialized, creative ways and other ideas to not only engage our donors, but to maybe have some of these virtual opportunities or other ways that we can be resourceful during this period of time. One of the things that I found that I thought was probably something very simple to put together, it was on YouTube. It was the Chino Valley United School District. And what they did is they gathered a group of students that were in choir, and they did a small concert. And so then they pushed that out to their donors. And I think the good news is that people can see that and realize our kids really still exist. They really are learning and excited, and they really are thinking in creative and radically different ways just like we're being forced to do as education foundations and school systems. So that was one thing that I saw. There was another group that had been right in the middle of a video contest with their students. And instead of canceling it with all of the hard work that had gone into it, they created a virtual awards ceremony, and they were able to put up on the screen the different videos, and everybody could watch and participate and look in and just create as much of the fun excitement. I did watch a lot of it, and it was really fun. It really probably would have been best if you were sitting in a seat watching it, but it was not bad. It really was really pretty good to just watch that.
Another thing I keep thinking about, there would never be a great time to have this kind of disaster, but think about all of the advances that we have experienced in the last 15 years, since the advent of the iPhone especially, that allows us to continue communicating with our donors. I know a lot of education foundations are using social media. There are some great sites that you can share, again, about how much we appreciate teachers, and there should be a red carpet welcome to the teachers when they come back onto campus. All of those things help keep our donors mindful of the good work that education foundations are doing.
I've seen in my experience where particularly smaller communities, rural communities, where the districts may not have a communications department per se, or where they have stepped up and utilized their communication channels, again, to share just good news, as well as some of the needs as the conversations are going on, just to kind of have that continuation of accurate information of what's going out, but also to kind of lift up the spirits of that there is hope and there is inspiration and perhaps even a call to action when the time is appropriate.
And actually, we received a question from Kate, who asked, how should we as education foundations provide hope and encouragement on social media? And I love this question so much that I actually went in and our latest FYI blog for Foundation Innovation is on this topic, because there is so much negativity. We're all watching the news cycle, which is ever changing. We are all, some of us have a little more free time and are engaged on social media, which is not always the greatest thing, because everyone's got an opinion on topics right now. And we are seeing so much negativity. This is a grave situation. We don't want to take away from the fact that it is a crisis, and the word pandemic is used consistently. But there are several things that you can do. Some suggestions for sharing that hope. I saw a great one from the Leander Educational Excellence Foundation, where they wanted people to write in and send in some recognition of their teachers. And when this whole thing is done, 100 of those teachers will either receive a facial or a massage from one of their donors. What a great thing to not only give teachers something to look forward to, but a chance for people to write in and share why their teachers are so amazing. You can pull from your academic recognition event programs or your paperwork for scholarships. Anything that might have quotes about a specific teacher or something that the school district has done and how that student attributes their success to your district or to that teacher. Share those quotes online, make a nice graphic, tag that teacher. Your staff and the district will begin to see that and want to build hope from that. I don't think there's anybody in the world, I think it was said earlier, that doesn't empathize with a school teacher right now. That is dealing with this at home and trying to teach from home. Also, share your school district's post. There are a lot of posts being made from leadership teams about how they're meeting virtually, just like our panel is, or leadership teams that are meeting and exercising social distancing. Show their commitment to the educational system and their commitment to making sure your children are learning. Anything that you can do, and Susie has mentioned this before, make sure your board is actively encouraged in sharing those posts. Have your board members share why they serve. Use those to highlight, this right now is more important. Their dedication to the success of the school district is needed. So use those as posts. All of those are opportunities. And then my last suggestion would be probably the biggest one. If you have provided a grant, if your education foundation has funded a grant look into, send a district-wide email and ask, are any of the grants that we've provided for technology or any type of kits, are those being utilized right now with our kids with stay-at-home or e-learning? And if you get responses in the affirmative, make sure that you highlight that. Hey, we funded this grant for one teacher, and now it's become a vital success for the district. You know, ask that teacher for photos if they had pictures of the grant in action, or if you have those from your own foundation archives. But those are great opportunities to look at maybe a small program that's now had to blow up and become much larger because of the way that students are learning. We had someone write in and mention that they had given out Chromebooks. Well, now is the time to tout the fact that you are ahead of the curve in providing that to students. So there's a lot of opportunities to provide that hope. But again, I'm seeing some great things that are boosting morale. We are all going to come out on the other side of this. And I personally would love to know that I would have a massage waiting for me when this is all said and done. So shout out to the organizations that are doing that. Is that something that typically falls in line with what our education foundations do? No. Is that something that the donor wanted to do? Yes. And the Education Foundation was the avenue to make it happen.
Maya, I would like to give a shout out to the Louisville Education Foundation. I thought they did something very clever on social media. They made a list of all of the restaurants in their area that had supported in foundation programs, and specifically asked their readers to consider getting takeout or delivery from one of their supporters. And I think that's something really nice that we can do right now for the people in the restaurant industry.
That's great.
Great ideas.
We have a question from Chris, and it says most school foundations have created critical needs funds to help their district meet demands of food and in-home education. This call to action is bringing together the community. However, it is galvanizing the fund's longtime supporters and supporters have given for longstanding programs. How do we create the balance to distinguish the flow of funds? And I'll just start out with this one by saying that your donors, if they've given you unrestricted cash gifts, they have trusted your board to the best use of those funds. So even if your funding priorities are changing, it is important to keep in touch with them, like we've said many, many times, but it can change. You can change what those dollars were used for, unless, now if you've accepted a restricted gift, it is important that you stay with that legal restricted gift and what the donor has intended to do. But if you feel that the donor might be amenable to changing or repurposing that, please feel free to go back to that donor and say, these are the immediate needs of the district right now. Your restricted gift was for an art grant that we're not going to be able to fund at this point, and wondered if you would be willing or are you interested in changing your restricted gift purpose. And we're seeing that all over the place. Donors are being pretty open to wanting to change to meet those needs because they want to see the outcomes, right? They want to see the outcomes of what their money's going to do. So don't be afraid to make this a very open conversation with your donors and your district, and not try and compartmentalize what people have given to you in a very, very defined area.
I think that what that also shows, Lori, with respect to having an open conversation with your donors about possibly kind of pivoting or restructuring their donation, is that it really exemplifies the integrity, the methodical approach of your organization and its operations, and also its accountability. And those are all, those will all serve education foundations well, not only in the immediate term, but also future term for veteran donors.
All right. Anita says she would like to know what other foundations are doing, and that she would also like to know what long-term needs that we could expect. Thoughts? One of the things Chris mentioned when we were talking about these questions is that, is it your high school graduating class, Chris?
No, there was one here in the Kansas City area that we had heard that they were considering if schools are still out when graduation rolls around, hosting it at a local drive-in theater, and showing a video montage, and obviously the cars will be able to park there, and with the FM transmissions, be able to pump audio, and as the kids' names were called, honk your horn, make some noise, and recognize the graduates that way.
Yeah, I think it's just limitless for us to come up with some creative ways to comply with our crisis issues of being quarantined and others, but being able to really utilize. I think it's been really funny for me because we've continued to work with clients and have board meetings on Zoom. And that's not a place everybody's comfortable with. Facebook and Zoom and Skype and WebEx and all of these things that are coming up that we're being asked to learn or be involved in is maybe not a real good spot for people. But it's becoming more and more of a comfort zone and a comfort area. There was one gentleman, we had a board meeting and he kept continuing to talk to his wife, and then his dog came in and was barking, and he just didn't realize the implication it would have on everybody. And I happened to be the one that was controlling the meeting, so I did mute him. But these things are going to be funny, and we're going to get to know each other better. And it may be kind of strange to have these types of meetings where we're looking at screens, but I think we're going to get more and more comfortable with it. And like Sean said, when we come out on the other side, we really don't know what is going to stick with us and what worked well, and how we're going to continue to move forward with what we are learning during this period of time.
And speaking to Anita's question too about some of the things that other education foundations are doing, we are seeing quite a bit step up in the way of providing the technology. That's probably the biggest thing. I follow a lot of the trends or a lot of the news items that come out about education foundations, and the two biggest items that seem consistent across the board are education foundations providing technology or technology access through connectivity, or some type of crisis fund to help the families of teachers or even the families of students. And there's a lot going on right now with meals and things like that. We're not necessarily seeing education foundations do that because I'm providing that, but still the distribution of that is coming from quite a few volunteers that are funneled by the education foundation. So most of what I'm seeing across the board, again, relates to technology or technology connectivity or those crisis funds to help families in need. And I think Susie mentioned mobile buses that have Wi-Fi that are going around to areas where kids might not have internet access at home. Susie?
Yes, that's correct. The Wi-Fi buses have the capability of parking, and kids can safely come sit in a chair 6 feet apart and pick up on the Wi-Fi. So we've seen several situations. I think San Antonio ISD was one that got heavily involved in helping with the connectivity. And I think Laurie could share more about that one.
Well, and not just San Antonio, but a lot of districts have found that their students may have the Chromebook, maybe they have the 1-to-1 ratio, but they don't have the connectivity at home. And so access is a real critical problem right now, and most foundations are having some kind of discussion around connectivity. I was on a Zoom meeting with a foundation board, and the superintendent was talking about the needs of purchasing hotspots. There was two gentlemen actually. One was involved with the chamber, and one was involved with another company that had opportunities to talk to them about reducing data plan costs and how to really create something that would be more affordable. And the result in just a very short period of time, less than a week, was significant just based on the collaboration and the networking that was going on with that board. So I think, hotspots, the data plans can be very expensive, but I think we're all recognizing we need to teach kids at home where they're at and provide what they need. And it really is something that the whole community wants to be a part of helping in. So it could be services, it could be product reduction. It could be that the foundation is able to offer the resources many foundations are telling us that they're reallocating money that might have gone to the grant program into more technology type programs for these immediate needs. So, you know, I think that just all of us collectively working together, we're better. And we're seeing stronger and stronger results as we move forward, and people are getting more and more comfortable in understanding that this isn't just a 2-week situation, that it's much, much more than that. Any other thoughts before I go to the last question?
Well, Laura, just to add to that, just real quick, we've already said this a little bit, but just don't underestimate being the PR agent for the school district. And we've said share the stories, but, you know, going back to the fundamental thing, the foundation can be the greatest cheerleader that the district has. And again, just whatever that means for your district and for your foundation, but being that PR agent that shares the great things that the district is doing is so helpful during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You know, that's a great point, Dawn, because so many times donors, investors, parents don't have relationships with the communications person or whomever. And so I feel those questions a lot too. I mean, people want to know from somebody that's on the inside, what's really going on, what's really happening. And so if you can help maintain that, if you can provide another voice to what the district's already telling, again, it reaffirms your status in the community, I truly believe.
Yeah, Maya sent me a link to, and I think it's happening all over, not just the link that she sent, but, you know, there's a lot of superintendents doing Facebook Live just to try and calm people down, keep them informed, help them to understand what's going on in the actions of the, not only the local school system, but some of the state mandates. I know that in Texas, there is constant communication with the commissioner to the superintendents about different things. And again, it's changing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we get a lot of money for school systems through our state. And so, you know, when that changes, we need to be aware of it, especially when you're talking about attendance and it being tied to attendance, and we don't have that anymore. You know, we're dealing with a lot of logistical things that we as community lay people, or even as our board members on foundations, may not be completely aware of. So I think that people are thirsty for that information. And I think that's a really good point, Sean and Dawn. So this last question comes from Kristen, and I actually love this question, and we saved it for last. But it says, hi there. My question would be if it's possible for education foundations to come together with a unified campaign at this time where we're utilizing the same social media messaging, hashtags, etc. An umbrella approach that allows the community to give where they live, but by education foundations coming together, we support and strengthen each other as we have a broader reach. Just a thought.
I love this too, Lori, and just to touch on that, we discussed it, and one of the things that we will be doing after we finish with this panel discussion is reaching out to some of the national organizations and the state organizations to get this going. It's a great idea, Kristen. It's something that we would like to see working with the National School Foundation Association, the Texas Education Foundation Network, and any other state consortiums to get this going. I mentioned Leander earlier, and Leander, when they were promoting their campaign, it's under hashtag some good news. And that's great, because that's what we need right now. Some good news. So education matters. Education will continue to matter. And again, as we've said, probably a lot of people that didn't understand necessarily how hard teachers work, well, they understand it now after a couple of weeks of homeschooling. They can definitely empathize and respect the job that teachers do. I mean, if for some that have 3 kids at home, multiply that by 28. And so this is a great time to really bring that collaborative effort together to get a hashtag going. I will say, along the lines of philanthropy, the Giving Tuesday campaign, Giving Tuesday is typically a date that's done in December to promote philanthropic gifts and donations to nonprofits globally. Well, the people that organized Giving Tuesday looked at this situation with COVID-19 and saw the hit that nonprofits would be taking due to their operations. And so again, rather than tuck our tails and run and hide and say, woe is us, those organizers got together and said, let's move another worldwide effort to get people interested in giving to nonprofits. So they've now set another date. It will be under hashtag Giving Tuesday Now. And that date is set for May the 5th. It will be another global effort. So that's something on a much larger scale that education foundations can tap into. But look for some information from us soon on how we can coordinate something just specific to education foundations. I think there's always sort of a feeling with education foundations that we are not, and I say this with quotes because this is what I've heard, but I've heard people say the bleeding heart organizations. There are so many needs right now for the nurses and doctors and healthcare providers and some champions on the front lines, but our teachers are on the front lines too. A lot of them right now are trying to educate kids at home in addition to working to educate our kids. So it's just this virus has done a lot to expose the systems that need support, and education is one of those. So let's not doubt that. Let's not take away from what we're doing, but make sure that we're being effective in communicating our message.
Yeah, I agree. There's lots of support. We mentioned it before. Don't be an island. Don't just do your own thing and feel like it's the weight of the world and all this crisis is on your shoulder. And engage your board if you're staff. If you're a board member, figure out how you can help your staff, how you can get involved, how you can have these types of meetings to have fun and open dialogue, because you're there to really help and support and show the district and the community that we are now really unified together for a very specific purpose. And we're going to come out on the other end of it showing that when we do that, maybe it doesn't need to be a crisis to make that happen. The outcomes are going to be realized. So that becomes just the way we operate. That's the way we actually function. And I think that this is a wake-up call in a lot of different ways, but we're going to be able to look at it in a positive light, even with all of the disaster feelings that are going on. We do have certain obligations that are going to still stay in place. So we have to make sure that we can meet those head on as education foundations, however we can. Any closing thoughts with you guys?
I would just thank the community for posing the questions to us. I hope that you find some value in this video and this panel discussion. I know that we've all, 7 of us, really enjoyed putting it together, and it's been fun to collaborate on it.
I agree. I think that it's been also fun just to share what we've seen from current and past clients. And so I would encourage just the continuation of, post what your education foundation is doing, creative ways or ways that you're inspiring your community. We can all learn, and there is a community that is just thirsty for just different ideas.
Well, we will do this again if we feel the response really warrants it. We can take your questions again and make this more interactive if you feel that that's better. We felt like right now, making it available so that people can look at it on their time was probably the best way to handle it, so you didn't have to try and schedule something. But we're willing to do it again. We bring, with this panel alone, 148 years of experience working with nonprofits and education foundations. So we may not be the end all to beat all, and the question about what do we should we expect in the future, we can all speculate. But we definitely feel like we have the experiences, and we've worked with enough education foundations that we hope that this has provided some guided relief and some tangible ideas that you can take back and actually implement. One of the things that I'm encouraging clients to do, and I actually had a happy hour with our family, 21 people, last Friday, and anytime that we wanted to vote as an education foundation, we just thought it would be fun to do it with jazz hands. So we're going to end this video with saying goodbye with our jazz hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.